Hello, this interview has been made possible by the View Conference. I'm your host, Jerry Orris from Kids First, and right now we are with Steve Goldberg. He is a visual effects supervisor at Disney Animation. He has worked on so many films, ranging all the way from Frozen 2 all the way to Aladdin, where he did some of the very first CG animation seen in Disney Animation. Before that, he worked at PDI, Pacific Data Images, as a CG animator, and his short film Locomotion, which released in 1989, is one of the earliest examples of CGI being used for storytelling. Steve, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Thanks, Jerry.
Well, it's an honor to have you. Now, my first question is about the job of visual effects supervisor. For the audience who doesn't know, VFX supervisor, it's generally a live action term. It's generally someone who's kind of a liaison between the director and the VFX department. They're responsible for making sure the director's vision is completed using visual effects. For animation, you still have a director, you still have a story, you still have a vision, but the entire film is visual effects because it's animated. So can you talk a little bit about the responsibilities of that job?
Sure. I find the responsibilities are very similar to what happens in live action. We like to say the mile high view of my job is to make sure that what the directors want ends up on the screen. So that falls to me. And as you said, every shot in an animated film is a visual effects shot. We create the environments, we create the characters, we create the effects. We do the cinematography, the camera work, the lighting. So all of that does fall. If you imagine a live action film with every single shot is a visual effects shot, that's kind of what we do.
Something I love about that is it's a very complex job. In visual effects, there is a very long pipeline of departments and chains and hierarchies and all that. And animation's even more so because, like you said, every single shot is visual effects. So can you talk a little bit about the day-to-day life is like leading such a complex pipeline that is constantly tinkering and making shots left and right?
Well, I have a fantastic crew that I get to hire the top level tier one supervisors for each film that I work on. And really, they're my right hand and left hand as we make the film. I spend a lot of time with the directors and the production designer to really understand what it is that they're looking for, what it is that they want to achieve. And then I work with, we have a technical supervisor who is really the liaison with the technology department and also all of our production TDs who are the support staff for the artists. I work with a head of animation. I work with the heads of characters and environments, and they create the assets that we use in the film. I get to work with two directors of cinematography, who are basically in charge of the camera and the lighting work. We have also heads of effects who are really focused on all the natural phenomena. So I get to, as I roll onto a film, I basically first need to understand what it is the directors are shooting for. Do they want more of a kind of overall traditional animation feel? And that will tell me the types of department heads that I want to hire. Or are they looking for something that veers a little more towards realistic? So really, what is that degree of caricature that we want to hit? So when I'm looking for the department heads, I'm looking for people that I think are really going to be a spectacular fit to achieve the director's vision and are excited and passionate about that particular aspect. And I get these wonderful people in who I get to work with every day, along with the production management. I get to work with the associate producer and producer every day. And we get to do all this. And of course, we have to make sure it's on budget also. And so really, it's working as a team. It's such a collaborative medium. That's how we take something very, very complex and simplify it down. And we make decisions with this very tight group of department heads. It's a lot of fun.
I want to talk more about the leadership, but before we do that, I think it's really important to cover something that a lot of beginning artists in animation and visual effects face, and that's kind of getting bogged down in the technicals. When you start learning, you're like, okay, you need to learn Maya, you need to learn Houdini, you need to learn Unreal Engine now, you need to learn Cinema 4D. The programs go on and on. You need to learn all these techniques. So how do you think artists can develop their creative skills outside these programs, outside all the technology? How do you think they can develop their creative skills that they use? Because again, they're artists. as visual effects artists.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It is so easy to go down so many rabbit holes of learning a new package and all the different packages and techniques that you need to master. I think it's really all about balance, and it requires, our best artists and our best technicians have skills in both the technical areas and what I would call the pure creative arts. So many of our technical staff and technical artists, they make sure that they are taking life drawing and really making sure that, as with any muscle, you've got to exercise it or it will go away. So there really needs to be balance and some self-discipline in going in and saying, you know what, Houdini just came out with some new features, but I'm going to my life drawing class because that's really important and I need to keep that up. And I think everyone, it's funny, just about everybody at the studio, they've got a pursuit that they love and is really close and dear to them. Most of them do it for a living, but everyone's got a little something that they also like to do that kind of satisfies the creativity. And for some people, that creativity might be programming. But for many others, they might do woodworking. I do wood carving on the side, and it's something that I just picked up when I think I was in middle school and just started doing and working in clay. And that's certainly not a requirement for my day job, but in many ways it is that I've got that background. And I would say, the advice I would have would be to follow your passion. What is it? It might be painting, it might be sculpting, it might be drawing. We always push life drawing because that's one of the most direct routes. And not worrying about how your work is. I think sometimes people who work on the more technical side, they're very self-critical and they worry a lot about what their drawings look like. And we always tell them, don't worry, just draw. Just draw, and the more you draw, the better you're going to get, but don't worry about how that one drawing looks. Just, tear it off the pad, throw it away, and get on with your next one. And it's really about the act of drawing and the love of drawing.
I think you just said a lot of great advice, especially, having a hobby outside of your main job. I think that's a great description of a good work-life balance. Now, going back to leadership a little bit, when you watch your short film, Locomotion, which, like I said, was made in 1989, and if you go to the credits at the very end, you see a lot of similar roles. You see modelers, you see animators, you see technicians, you see environment artists, as we were talking about. So how do you think that the growth of CG over the last 20 or 30 years has changed the way films are made? Because you see a lot of the same positions despite Locomotion being 3 decades older than something like Frozen 2, for example.
That's a great question. I believe that there are so many tasks, and to take it even further, we have a pipeline at Disney Animation for our CG films that is remarkably similar to a pipeline that we had going back to Snow White. There are certain steps that need to be taken. I think it really boils down to you've got visual development where we know what the story is, but let's go out and just, pie in the sky. What could this look like? What are all the possibilities? I would say that's as similar to what we do today, and it doesn't matter what the medium is. It could be a stop motion film, it could be a live action film, it could be animation. There's always that exploration, visual exploration, and then we create the assets. So we've got to create our characters and environments. It's live action does the same thing. They're getting their actors and costumes. They're scouting real sets, or now they're creating virtual sets, which is awesome. We'll get to that later. In many ways, it's very similar to what we've been doing in CG really since the inception, the creation of the assets. And then when we get into shot work, we start with the camera work. We get into the performance. Back in the day, it was more, some more flying logos, so the performance was somewhat limited. But now we've got full-blown characters, and sometimes the environments are alive and interact with the characters, and we take it all the way through. So I think there are some fundamental steps that are just base core filmmaking techniques that we continue on.
I find it fascinating how kind of universal the structure is. And you know, Disney's not the only one with the pipeline. That's very logical, like you said. Almost every single animation studio, probably every animation studio, has a very similar pipeline, starting in visual development, going all the way to rendering, and it's just beautiful seeing it all unfold. Now, before we talk a little bit about the future of the industry, I want to talk a bit more about leadership. So, what I find fascinating about your job and other jobs, kind of in the supervisor fields of filmmaking, is that they're management roles. You know, they're overseeing people as much as they're overseeing the art itself. So how do you think people can develop those leadership skills per se?
What I have found is everybody's worked for all kinds of different bosses. And depending on what the roles are, I used to be in food service. And really, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to have supervision. And there will be supervision that you love and adore and would do anything for. And there's some supervision that maybe you don't feel as fondly about. What I found was I was really kind of studying what was it about those supervisors that made me enjoy what I was doing and brought fulfillment to it. And I started doing a lot of thinking about that. So I guess ultimately, you know, as far as leadership goes, I say, you know, look at people who are doing it right and try and figure out what it is they're doing. Also, there are so many fantastic resources out, books, videos, different talks, and so much of this is available. And I'd say, you know, find those things that really resonate. And I think my leadership style is, you know, everything went into the blender of supervisors that I had that I really loved, and just try bringing all of that in. And then, you know, a lot of it is on the job. You see how people are reacting to your different leadership styles. And, you know, there are certainly ways of delivering rough news to a crew that they'll respond well to. And most of it boils down to context. Nobody likes to be told what to do without understanding why. And I think that's at the core of strong leadership.
I would definitely agree with that. And for our audience, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about leadership, we have an interview with Rob Rado. He's the head of Industrial Light Magic. We talk a lot about overseeing a large company like Industrial Light Magic in that interview, so check it out. Now, Steve, looking towards the future, when you first started, it was a big time in CG. I mean, we were just inventing fundamental things about CG animation, and now it's exploded. So looking to the future, what do you think are some of the biggest innovations people should keep their eyes on?
Great question. I'm really excited by what AI can bring to computer graphics, computer animation. I think it's a field that is just ripe for exploration. I know there's quite a bit of research happening in that area now, but I really believe that that is going to take us to a place where it can, say, strip away the mundane parts of the tasks and really allow the artist to focus on the pure artistry rather than having to, you know, wade through some technical baggage that just comes along for the ride. You know, we were talking earlier about learning new packages, and I think that the great promise of the AI is going to be getting an artist to a much better starting place that can then allow them to bring what's unique to their artistry.
Hmm. You know, I have a story related to this. So to remove backgrounds from a picture of someone, that was generally a very strenuous process. You either had to key it or mask it out, or very hard. There's a site called remove.bg, uses an AI, you click do buttons, does it perfectly. Saves maybe half an hour to an hour. Absolutely beautiful. I love it so much. But we are running low on time, but before we go, I do want to ask you, do you have any advice for people who are entering the animation field or entering the visual effects field, and they're not really sure where to go, what to start, maybe even a little bit scared because of the pandemic going on? What advice would you give them?
I would say there are many, many resources online. So even if you're stuck at home during the pandemic, there are so many spectacular resources out on the web right now. I think what you're doing is wonderful, and bringing this to students. Uh, but there are life drawing classes that happen online, and some of them are free of charge. Just needs a Google search to find those. Uh, and so many different pieces of advice from artists who are working in the field. I would say take a look at the credits of films that you really love, and look at who's doing that aspect of what you love, and Google search them, find out what they do, see if they've put anything out in terms of talks. So many of our artists in our visual development ranks, they have their own websites, and they put their work out on Pinterest or LinkedIn, and it's a daily flood of fantastic work. And I would say, you could certainly contact these people if it's someone whose work you really admire. I find most people in the industry really love talking with students and people who aspire to get into the field. And people are quite generous with their time if they've got available time and they're not in crunch on a film.
I think that's some really amazing advice, and it shows you just how much information, how much tools we have access to now using the internet. Sadly, Steve, that is all the time we have, but thank you so much for talking to me all about your career.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Jerry.
Absolutely. For our audience, Steve's many, many films are available now, so check them out. And also check out his early animated short, Locomotion. It's a really wonderful film. When you're watching, remember this was made in 1989. That's just crazy. But this interview is made possible by the View Conference. I'm your host, Jerry Orrs from Kids First. The View Conference is a yearly CG event that is happening both online and in person this year. It is happening between October 18th and October 23rd. For information about the View Conference, go to viewconference.it. Bye!